Here we go. It's been a while since I've gotten to read. I've been kind of under the weather, so here we go. Next chapter of Lois Lowry's The Willoughbys is chapter 11, An Astonishing Acquisition. Commander Melinoff opened the door and peered into the basket in astonishment. He looked up and down the street to see if a delivery man had left this thing on his doorstep by mistake. But no, the street was quite empty. Finally, in confusion, because it kept smiling at him, and no one had smiled at him in a very long time, he leaned down and lifted it out of its basket, holding it at an arm's length because its lower half was damp. Commander Melinoff carried this stubbly-haired baby into his mansion. Excuse me. He looked down for a suitable place to set it down. The velvet couch in the drawing room had holes in it that mice had made, and gray wads of stuffing were protruding from the holes. There was a table nearby, but an old, open pizza box with some greenish pizza crust inside had been on the table for weeks, and ants were crawling on it. Finally, he carried the creature into the kitchen and laid it carefully on the drain board beside the sink. From his half-forgotten past, thinking back sadly to his own lost child, he vaguely remembered the procedure about diapers. In a nearby drawer, reaching with one arm while he kept the other firmly upon the wriggling infant, he located a folded dish towel. He had not washed dishes in several years, and he had thrown some away after they'd been used, and others he had reused, simply heaping his takeout Chinese food or pizza slices onto the remains of the last meal. So there was still a drawer filled with laundered dish towels left over from the days when there had been cooks and servants in the large kitchen. The days when his wife had organized things like dish towels by color and size and date of purchase. He fashioned one into sort of a diaper and tied it awkwardly around the bottom half of the baby. Then, holding the baby in one arm, he opened the large refrigerator and peered in. Once, long ago, this refrigerator had been filled with juices and jams, casseroles and chickens, cheeses and pastries, salad greens and truffles and endives and olives. It had always been a little distressing to him that his meticulous wife had insisted on alphabetical arrangements. It meant that ascots were next to argyle socks in his dresser, and his underwear was tucked away with the umbrellas. Even here in the kitchen, one had to locate the anchovies in order to find the apricots. Still, he thought wistfully, it had been pleasing to have a refrigerator filled with food. Now it was completely empty except for a small bowl with something green and furry on the bottom and a stack of test candy bars for his factory. He had been, before his tragedy, working on a new bar filled with caramel and nuts in various combinations and coated with rich chocolates. He had thought then that it would be his masterpiece, and now the test bars lay in uneven stacks on the refrigerator shelf. He groaned slightly when he saw them and closed the heavy door. He reached for the telephone, balanced it on his shoulder, and dialed the number of the local grocery store and pizza parlor. "This is Commander Melinoff," he said when the grocer answered. "Deliver milk immediately and, he glanced at the baby. Oatmeal, I think, yes, oatmeal, maybe applesauce, and things to wrap around the bottom of an infant that are not dish towels." "Pampers?" asked the grocer. "I am an old-fashioned gentleman." "Diapers, then," suggested the grocer. "Or if you truly are old-fashioned, they would be called nappies." "Yes, those." "Anything else, sir?" Oh dear," Commander Melinoff whimpered a bit. I don't know. Have you acquired an infant, sir?" The commander sighed. "Yes," he acknowledged. "What size, sir?" The melancholy tycoon looked down at it, and he remembered holiday celebrations of past. "The size of a small turkey," he said. "That would be about 14 to 16 pounds, I'd say. Does it have teeth, sir?" Cradling the phone again on his shoulder, Commander Melinoff gingerly used his free hand to pry open the small mouth so that he could look inside. "A few," he said. 3, I think, and very stubbly hair. Does it appear capable of chewing, sir? At that moment, the baby bit down on Commander Melinoff's finger. Ouch! Yes, it does, he said into the telephone. Very good, sir. Our delivery boy will be there shortly with everything you need, and shall we send tonight's pizza at the same time? Gloomily, Commander Melinoff looked around the kitchen. The remains of at least 23 pizzas, old crusts dotted with decaying pepperoni slices, their torn open stained boxes were stacked on countertops and tables everywhere. Then he looked at the infant still in his arms. She smiled at him. No, he told the grocer with a sigh. Send a salad with some vitamins. I think I'm going to have to revigorate myself. Send soap as well, he added reluctantly before he hung up. I'm going to need soap. Then he replaced the telephone receiver. He stared down again at the thing in his arms. The placid baby stared back, and then reached up and tugged gently at his mustache. And so life began anew for the melancholy tycoon and the affable infant. He called her Ruth, since he had eventually unfolded and read the note that had been pinned to her clothing. Her name is Ruth, the note had said. He ordered clothes for her, since it would have made him too sad to go to the attic and open trunks and boxes that contained small clothing that had been his own child. And, too, his own lost child had been a son. This one was a girl. So he bought small, elegant velvet dresses and pinafores with lace. He bought her hair ribbons, and though the baby's hair was oddly stubbly and short, and there was nothing to tie a ribbon to, he hoped it would grow. On the advice of an elderly sales lady at the expensive store at which he placed his order, he also bought more serviceable clothing, overalls and jumpsuits with small pockets and applique giraffes. A baby needs to play, the woman had told him. The little dresses are fine for birthday parties and Christmas photographs, but she will need to crawl on the floor and explore, and let me recommend these very fine play clothes. Shall I add them to your bill? And he said yes. We could monogram everything, she added. A monogram is a very fine thing. Commander Melinoff knew what a monogram was. In the days when he had gone each morning to his factory, he had worn shirts with his initials hand-embroidered on the pocket. I don't know her initials, he explained sadly to the salesman. Oh dear. Do you know her name? Ruth. Lovely. Why don't we embroider Ruth on all their clothes then? A short name suits that purpose so well, and if her name was, say, Clementia, then we would have to rethink, wouldn't we? Monograms are charged by the letter. Clementia would be very costly. Money is of no importance. I want the best, he replied. And so all of her clothing was adorned with her name. He cleaned the house on behalf of Ruth's well-being. He carried all the pizza boxes to the trash and washed the mouse droppings from the countertops and the floors. But when she crawled across the newly cleaned living room floor and grabbed the edge of an elegant drapery, swirls of dust arose, and moths had been living in the folds of fabric, were dislodged and flew in confusion around the room. Ruth laughed at the sight of the fluttering insects, but Commander Melinoff took down the heavy draperies and added them to the pile of trash, on top of the pizza boxes. He called in fumigators to rid the house of the moths, and he washed the windows, which had become so caked with grime that the neighborhood was blurred. The only thing he did not clean or dislodge, as he went about his work with brooms and sweepers and buckets and brushes, was a towering stack of unopened mail from Switzerland. The 6 years of messages and telegrams and letters that were still piled against the wall in the front hall. Ruth, who was still acquiring teeth, occasionally pulled a bit of paper from the lower portion of the stack and chewed on it. One morning, Commander Melinoff, who had prepared the baby's morning oatmeal in the kitchen, picked her from where she was happily crawling on the floor. She spat a scrap of yellowing paper into his hand. He looked at the torn words and phrases, groaned, remembering those early days when he still had hope. Carefully, he tied a bib around her neck to protect her pink hand-smocked monogram jumpsuit. There you are, baby Ruth, he said, and sat in her high chair and ordered he sat her in the high chair he had ordered from a costly catalog. Spooning oatmeal into her mouth, he thought about the stack of mail. He decided that he must throw it all away, but time passed and he could not bring himself to do it. Often the baby played in the hall, and sometimes she grabbed at the letters. In her first weeks with Commander Melinoff, she could reach only the earliest mail, but when she began to pull herself up and stand on wobbly legs, she reached higher. Once she withdrew a sealed envelope with a Swiss stamp from the middle of the stack. She tore the envelope open, removed a folded letter, and chewed on it briefly. Then she crumpled the damp paper into a ball and rolled it across the floor for the cat to chase. The cat could not read, for it was a cat, and Ruth could not read, for she was a baby. Commander Melinoff, who was a grown man with several college degrees, could read extremely well, but never noticed the wad of paper that eventually wedged itself under the radiator, so that no one knew that a letter mailed 4 years earlier had announced, "They are